Hello, friends. Happy Wednesday and happy 2021. So glad that you're here today. And I have a very special guest. Her name is Bobbie Ort, and she is the creator of the Dumpster Fire Diary podcast. And I just want to read what her statement around this podcast is. It is turning real life dumpster fire stories into life's greatest lessons. It's to reassure people that they are not alone, that everyone goes through struggle and setbacks and pain, and that is a part of life. And I am really excited to bring Bobbie here into the studio. Hello, Bobbie.
Hi, Christina.
You are in a beautiful place there with a palm tree in the background. It makes me really look forward to spring.
Myrtle Beach. It's not super warm, but it has palm trees.
It has palm trees. And you are from Denver, so this is a real treat for you to be out there.
It is. One thing COVID's given me is some time. So time to visit my family and take a break.
Awesome. Well, I really want the audience to hear about Dumpster Fire Diary podcast.
The Dumpster Fire Diary. It's a relatively new podcast that I started. What I consider a dumpster fire experience is one of those experiences where something went horribly wrong or totally sideways. Maybe you got fired from a job, or a relationship ended, or you made a mistake, and those experiences basically turn us into the people that we are today. And so I just wanted to normalize the struggle basically and reassure people that they're not alone. We all go through the struggle. And so on the podcast, I wanted to have people share their stories as well as me share my stories around things that have went sideways and the lessons that we learned through those experiences, as well as the tools or maybe the tricks that helped us get through some of those things. And I'm hoping that maybe some people, yes, we all have to go through our own experiences, but maybe we can save other people a little bit of heartache or pain, by sharing what we went through in our struggle and in our mess. That makes sense.
It makes so much sense. And I love what you're doing. And it's kind of similar to what we do here. It's about, transformation, inspiration. And I have to say, you as a podcast host, you do such a great job of pulling out these stories from people, things that so many people might keep hidden away. You're very, very good at creating a space where people feel comfortable airing their dirty laundry, if you will. And I think that is such an important thing to do, because once you can release that shame, it's just other people can learn from that. And for you as a person, wow, like releasing the shame, you can move on in your life. Has that been your experience with people on this show?
Yes, you as a person, like obviously, especially if you're feeling shame or guilt around something, talking about it with anybody, whether it's on a podcast, which is maybe a little extreme, to just sharing it with anybody, a therapist, whoever, that you have these experiences, it takes it out of the darkness, it sheds some light on it. And so I think that for some people it's a healing journey. For other people, they want to turn their mess into their message, and share their struggles with other people because they're at that point. I'm not saying like, the podcast is the way to go for everybody, but it's just knowing that, like, talking about those experiences, it's okay to talk about those experiences. As we were talking before, I've been a paramedic for 15 years. And so mental health is a really big issue that I've seen over the years. And especially with the first responder community, suicide among the first responder community just continues to grow and grow and grow. And it's something, especially as first responders, we don't want to talk about, or we're not supposed to show weakness. And we think that falling down or making mistakes is exactly that. It's a sign of weakness, when in reality, failure is just a part of life. Like, we all go through failure. Like, failure makes you human. And by talking about your failures, your mistakes. It normalizes those experiences so that people can relate to you. It, in listening to other people's experiences, then you know you're not alone, and other people go through these things too. And I just want people to know that, you know, things keep going, things get better. You know, you can go through this horrible dumpster fire experience and it may seem like it's the end of the world right now, but it's not.
Yeah, I love that so much. And just so you're an EMT, that's your training, that's your vocation. So, what inspired you? You've talked a little bit about it, but was there a turning point moment where you said, I want to do this other thing? Or how did this evolution from EMT to EMT plus being a podcaster happen?
Huh. I can't say that there was necessarily a distinct turning point. Like I said, I've been a paramedic for 15 years. I consider myself a lifetime schoolie. I have an MBA in healthcare management, but I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But I just know that I like helping people and serving people. And I definitely struggled throughout my teens and my 20s. Even still today with mental health issues, you know, depression, anxiety, etc. And it's still not something that's talked about. So 10, 15 years ago, as a late teens, you know, I was still under 18. I sought out help for myself. Like I knew that I wasn't feeling great and maybe I needed medication. And, you know, so I took the proactive steps, but life has always been a struggle. And it's just, I think now that I've been a paramedic for so long and seeing, like, experiencing the struggle firsthand, having mental health issues, and then experiencing it from an employee perspective, a provider perspective, a friend perspective. Like, if somebody's in crisis, you call me to show up for you. But what happens when I'm in crisis? Or what happens when one of my first responder friends is in crisis? You know, who helps those people? And so I just want those people to know that it's okay. You know, that was probably the turning point. You know, every first responder suicide that I hear about, or, you know, losing people. And then definitely the birth of my son was a big turning point for me. You know, maybe they always say, like, find something you'll die for and you'll live every single day. You know, I didn't have that perspective when I was younger, in my 20s and 30s. Like, maybe I hadn't found my reason for living. And now that I have my son, that was definitely a turning point for me. Like, there's no going back now. There's no giving up now. And so it pains me every time that I hear people struggling and thinking that they need to hide it, or that there's still this stigma that you can't ask for help. Is just a big, that was my turning point. Like, it's just, we have to normalize the struggle, really.
I love that. I love how you turned your mess into your message, and really love how, you know, you talked about when your son was born, having that thing that you were willing to die for. But I think you touched on a really important point. You are also wanting to live for it every single day. And I think sometimes, and probably in the first responder world, and I don't know, and thank you for correcting me that you are a paramedic. I appreciate that correction. Um, that I have a philosophy, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it is that it is actually easier to die for something than to live for something every day, because dying is a 1 second, well, it, not always, but you know what I mean. Would I run out in front of a car to save my child? Without even thinking, I absolutely would. But am I living for my child every single day? Am I showing up for my child? I'm living for that. I think that she brought up a really great point there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I talk a lot about mind hacks and stuff, but along those same lines, I've looked I'm not by any means a psychologist. I'm not giving professional advice to anybody, but I've been personally like thinking into what causes people to think that there's no way out. Like what would cause people to give up. And like you said, sometimes we'll do more either for other people or to avoid pain. You know, we'll avoid those things that'll give us pain more than we will go towards something that gives us pleasure. You know, it's just.
For sure.
And so I've just been thinking about that. So maybe it's, you know, thinking, yeah, we could go on forever about that, but it's just, yeah, it's maybe assigning pain, so much pain to the alternative that giving up isn't the option, you know? And so.
I like that. And you're absolutely right. You know, and that awareness that pain is a bigger driver than pleasure. Pain avoidance actually trumps, you know, pleasure achievement or whatever. And that awareness alone, I think, can make some big changes. If people are aware, what is driving this behavior? Is it avoidance or is it to gain, you know, this other thing? So.
Right. And to each your own, like one may serve you and one may serve somebody else. It's just people, especially when you struggle with depression. I don't know if you've ever struggled with depression, but
Yeah.
people will be like, well, just go for a walk or work out and you'll feel better. But when you don't feel like getting out of bed, the last thing that you want to do is go for a walk. So goals are great. Like I think that you should set goals, but sometimes just going after the good thing isn't enough, especially when you're in that dark, abysmal place. So maybe you do need to use pain as your ally, you know?
Yeah. So what would you suggest, Bobbie, for someone who is in that place? Because yes, the answer is yes, I have suffered through some depression at different points in my life. I wouldn't call it like massive depression. For me, it was very, very dark. When I look at some experiences from other people, I don't feel like it was particularly heavy in the scheme of things or on a relative scale. But what would you recommend? Because I know what it feels like to not want to get out of bed, to not be able to get yourself off the phone or off of Netflix because it's just escapism or sleeping or whatever. What would you suggest for someone like that? Because you're right. The typical go for a walk will just snap yourself out of it is so trite.
Yeah. First, and maybe like go for a walk is one of those things I like to use, but basically just doing anything briefly for me to like move my body. It doesn't have to be, oh, I'm going to go to the gym. That's a big goal. But if it's just I got out of bed and I took a shower, or if it was a brief walk, my favorite go-to is like find a couple songs that will always change my mood and just throw them on and dance. Like I'm not a good dancer by any means, but it makes me feel silly and it just shifts your mood. That motion like helps change that emotion. It's cliche, but it definitely can work. And so I understand when they say go for a walk and exercise, they're recommending that so that you increase your endorphins, and that's the good long-term solution. But I'm looking at the 15-second or the 2-minute cures. Like, what if I can move my body for 2 minutes right now? I just got a trampoline plane going overhead, mini trampoline. Some people call them rebounders, and just jumping up and down on that, like, totally will make me feel better. So just something to shift me out of that state, basically. And then like we were talking before, or maybe it was on this, talking about it, like shedding light on how you feel and just realizing that you're not alone there. You may not find somebody that has the answer, but I'm sure that there are people, my friends, your family, who would be willing to sit with you in the darkness. You know, they're not going to necessarily say anything or do anything that's going to make you feel better, but you just know that you're not alone. And sometimes that's all you need, is just to know you're not alone. There are other people that don't want you to give up.
It makes such a big difference, just that knowing that you are not alone. I love your suggestion to pick out a few songs, like put them on your Spotify playlist or whatever, and just know you've got a couple of songs that'll help lift your spirits and get you up and moving. That movement makes such a huge difference, that changing your state, huge difference. So I love that suggestion and knowing that you're not alone. And I love that mission of your podcast, just letting people know they are not alone. And here's how someone dealt with it. And what can you pull out of that to help you do it? What have been, just in the last few minutes here, what would you say have been at least one of the most massive learning experiences that you've learned from your own dumpster fire experiences that have made who you are today? So it could be the experience or a lesson, but something that our listeners can just go, I see myself in that, and now I feel like I've got a direction.
Whew. It's probably one that some people go through in life. This was probably about 10 years ago. I got fired from a job. You know, they say certain things, especially right now, they're talking about things that are recession proof, you know, and healthcare is one of those things. But this was back in, you can probably remember, like 2009, when the economy was crashing, and I thought that I had a recession proof job, which maybe I did, but I ended up fired. So I was looking for a job, and in 2009 was not the time to be looking for a job. It was not a great time for businesses. So I found myself, you know, struggling from that. Of course, then I was going through a horrible breakup shortly thereafter, and I saw, you know, thought my world was ending, and I thought that he was the one for me, and I couldn't see the other side. You know, things had to get worse before they got better, which sometimes that they do. But now, as I talked about, something I talked about this week in my podcast is, you know, you can set goals and you can see how far you go, but don't forget how far you've come. And so something, especially when I'm in those times where maybe this year just didn't go the way that you wanted it to go, and it's ending on a bad note and you lost something, but looking back at how far you've come in the last 10 years. So now I am further along than I ever thought that I would be. I'm happily in the best relationship I've ever been in with, get this, the guy that fired me. So it's like, it's a lesson on how to be a good boss. B, like, you can, things work out in unexpected ways. And so from my personal experience, you know, being fired, being broke, not seeing the other side, and now I'm, you know, I'm happy. I'm in this relationship with that man, and I have a beautiful 5-year-old, and I have a job, like, you know, all the things. There's light on the other side. Just keep going. And so just know that other people go through these things too. Like, I go through these things, you go through these things. There's no shame in these things. We all fall down and we all fail. It makes us human. Talking about it will normalize it for you. It will normalize it for everybody else. And that's how you move forward. You know, as long as you're growing, that's the biggest takeaway or thing that I've learned through all this, is to adopt a growth mindset. Like, as long as I'm learning from my failures and going forward, like, mistakes, failing is just a part of life. So.
Wow, that actually even made me just a little bit emotional, just thinking about 10 years ago and how where we are now, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those experiences. And, you know, talking about this, sometimes when we talk about this kind of stuff, we heap so much judgment on ourselves, or listening to somebody else's story, we might heap some judgment on that. But by what you're doing with your podcast and normalizing some of these experiences that are some ugly human experiences that become beautiful, because I think of the image I have going through my mind is the caterpillar breaking out of the chrysalis, of the cocoon, to become that beautiful butterfly. I don't know how that feels, but from what I've watched on YouTube and in the science class now when you're in 5th grade, it seems like it's a hard thing for that butterfly to emerge from the cocoon. And so I love how you are taking these experiences and showing the beautiful butterfly that comes out of the other side. And when we can hear this and not cast judgment on ourselves, we're not casting judgment on other people either, because we can learn to love ourselves and love others exactly where we are and on our path. So thank you for your mission, Bobbie, and for what you're doing for the world, and especially for the first responders. I think that that's powerful.
I love that. I loved the chrysalis and the cocoon. I like to think of it as, that seems very beautiful and it's great, but I admit the struggle in it. So I think I was forged in the fire, like all of those dumpster fire experiences, they made me into the person that I am today. So
For sure.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you.
Thank you for being here with us today, Bobbie. It's just been an absolute pleasure. And you can find Bobbie on Facebook, on Instagram, and of course on our podcast. And all the links are in the description here. And Bobbie, I wish you all the best in your podcast. And I feel very honored that you've been with me today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers, everyone. Have a great week.